Live from the Business RadioX studio inside Renaissance Bank, the bank that specializes in understanding you. It's time for North Fulton Business Radio.
And hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of North Fulton Business Radio. I'm John Ray, and we are coming to you virtually. We're not back in our studio inside Renaissance Bank at the moment, but we're looking forward to getting back there one of these days soon, yet to be determined. But in the meantime, if you've got a desire for a more personal experience with your bank, give Renaissance Bank a call. I know the work they do. I've dealt with them personally with some of my clients, and they do great work. And they answer their own phone, and you don't have to call a 1-800 number in, who knows what big city that's way outside the South. So check them out. 200 offices across the South ready to serve you. Go to renaissancebank.com, find one of those offices, and go give them a call, make an appointment. That's what you have to do to get in the branch, but they're happy to see you. You just have to make an appointment. renaissancebank.com is the site. Renaissance Bank, understanding you, member FDIC. And now I want to welcome Bruce Peoples, and Bruce is with Peoples Marketing Insights. Bruce, welcome.
Thank you, John. It's good to be here.
Great to have you. So tell us a little bit about you and People's Marketing Insights. How do you serve the market out there?
All right. I appreciate that. Basically, John, companies or brands hire me to find out what their customers really think about their brands, products, or services. I started under the umbrella of what we used to call marketing research back in the day, and then it morphed into consumer insights somewhere in the 90s.
Okay.
Yeah. And today it's customer experience or user experience and things like that, but they're all very related.
Mm-hmm.
So as I said, companies hire me to find out what their customers think. The most common tool that I use is like a focus group where I get about 8 of their folks around a table, and we go through a structured discussion. What I do is called qualitative research, and that's simply because my partner is Quantitative research. Those are custom research firms that do surveys. So where I talk to 8 people, a survey may talk to 100 people. So that's just a trade term. But anyway, that's in a nutshell what I do. I get inside consumers' heads and find out what they really think about products, features, advertising, etc. Anything under the marketing umbrella.
This may seem like the most obvious question in the world, and it is. But there's probably a less than obvious answer to it. Why do it?
Why do it? Well, that's a good question. Obviously, if a company's up and running and they're successful, they already know about their customers in general, right?
However, presumably, but maybe not, right?
Absolutely. One of the reasons they hire me to do that is because I bring a more formal process to that whole thing. For example, go out and find out what our customers think. And you could ask their sales force, but I also bring an objective opinion or objectivity to it that internal folks just can't do. And there's many steps involved. It's like a 7-step process. So you want me to talk to your customers. Well, like who exactly? What age, which gender, where do they shop? This is where we get into the nitty-gritty details. When do we want to talk to them? Where do we want to talk to them? What do we want to ask them about? So it becomes a more of a formal process that generates better results, really. For every time I do this, I come up with specific recommendations. Here's what you need to do with your brand, your package, your pricing, your advertising. So that's one of the reasons they hire me. Also, if they have a new product, let's say they already have an existing line, but they want to change the package, or they want to put some new features on there. I spend a lot of my time presenting new products to customers and getting their feedback because, as you know, I don't know what the number is, but launching a new product, for example, in the grocery channel, costs millions of dollars. Companies want to get it right. So that's why they hire me.
Sure. And it takes a little bit of humility on the part of companies to hire you, because it is true that companies sometimes are successful without knowing why. They think they know why, right?
It's true.
But sometimes they really don't know the real answer, and you help provide that.
That is correct. A lot of times, as I say, we dig into features and benefits of products. For example, I did some work for a company that makes some very simple tools. We're talking shovels and rakes.
Okay.
And I interviewed landscape contractors, which are a great group of folks. That's a whole separate story. But by doing what I call it in-person research, as opposed to a survey. And one of the things that we do, we get at people's emotional connection with a brand or a product. And as you know, a lot of products, status type products, alcohol, things like that are marketed solely on like an emotional connection or a lifestyle and things like that. And surveys really can't get at that very well. So that's just another thing. Pretty much in every discussion I have a question, basically, how do you feel when you use this product? Or sometimes I'll get at it in an indirect way. But that's the other thing. Brands really need to have an emotional connection to really stand out from the rest.
What you're talking about there are the intangibles that go beyond just the features and benefits of the product.
Absolutely. So I spent my whole life in branding. I started out in consumer products at Legs, not because I was an expert in pantyhose, but I went to, there's many stories about that.
I can't wait to ask a few questions about that, but no, go ahead.
But I went to IU, Indiana University Graduate School, and there were several IU grads there. So another thing, it's all about referrals and relationships and things like that. But my background in consumer products has really helped me. It's given me a good framework for any company, including B2B, just understanding who's your customer, what are the features and benefits, what matters to them, those kind of things.
I wish you would review, Bruce. You talked about the qualitative and quantitative research methods. Yes. Define that again for us, and just talk about the pros and cons of each. Okay.
Well, a lot of this comes from consumer products companies. Procter & Gamble is the gold star, and I'd like to think that I learned a lot of their similar approaches. And when you're launching a new product or you're talking to your customer, most companies do both. Sometimes they'll do the qualitative first. I'll go out and I'll talk to the customers, and we'll get the right language. We'll find out what matters with them. And then they use that learning to create a quantitative survey, to get feedback on things like purchase intent, likes and dislikes and things like that. So we often work together. I work actually for a lot of quantitative research firms, and we kind of work in tandem, in partnership, trying to solve the same problem. The difference is their results are statistically significant, right? If you survey 100 people or 1,000 people, you can say, well, we know statistically that your product is going to succeed, or this price point is best. Mine's a little more, like I said, qualitative. I can help explain it. One of the cliches is qualitative explains the whys behind the quantitative, the why the customer does this, why they think this way. So that's kind of the difference.
And you can, if you're doing an in-person interview, I mean, the visualization I have is looking out my front window and seeing you talk to the landscape guy.
Well,
but I mean,
that would be fun.
Yeah, but it's seriously, if you're doing that though, you get the benefit of all the visual clues, the auditory clues that you wouldn't have through a survey, right? I mean, you're able to see and talk to someone, and the interview can go all sorts of different ways in a really good way in terms of understanding.
It sure can.
Right.
It's the value of the interactive and the back and forth. And I have what's called a discussion guide. It guides my questions. The client, we make sure we have in that guide all the topics we need to talk about. But sometimes it's good to let the interviewee just kind of ramble on, as long as they stay within our fence rails, so to speak. And you'd be surprised what they will share with you. I do a lot of interviews via phone, believe it or not. And I do a lot of them in person too. But you're right. And when I do focus groups, that's even more challenging because we sometimes have 7 or 8 people, and I'm trying to read faces when someone says something, and I'm looking at other people's reactions like, oh, that's that. I don't agree with that. As my wife says, I operate in a Windows world. I have a lot of tabs open at the same time.
I like that.
Trying to figure out who's doing what and how they react. So facial expressions are, I think, one of the great advantages of doing what I call in-person research.
I would love to hear some case studies. That's the technical way of saying success stories that you've had in terms of folks you've worked with, brands you've worked with.
Sure. Well, I've worked with most of the big brands here in Atlanta. I don't know if I should say them. Let's say large beverage companies, large home improvement companies.
Oh, okay.
Paper product companies.
Yep.
Carpeting, flooring companies. So I've worked for most of them. It's been a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Well, one I mentioned earlier was a company that makes tools. I've gotten in a nice groove where a lot of companies that sell to the big box home improvement retailers. And we had a bunch of landscape contractors in there, and they're great. I love talking to them. You know, and that falls under the umbrella of business to business, because it's really one business selling to another business. But a lot of those folks really love to be heard. They're flattered that, you know, the company, and they try and guess who's sponsoring it, but they're really flattered that someone wants to hear their opinion and get their input on making some new products. And so in this case, very mundane products. You know, when the client came to me and said, "I've got shovels and rakes," and I'm thinking, this is going to be real exciting.
Right.
But the reality was, it was great. I mean, when you live with a shovel and rake all day, every little feature and benefit becomes very important to you. There's trade-offs in price, you know, there's trade-offs in durability and features and materials. And we quickly filled up 90 minutes, and we came away with some great specific product recommendations on this is what you should do with these particular products as you go forward to manufacture them. Mm-hmm. I've also done some work with, I present a lot of new concepts too. For example, I did some work with algae sufferers at one point. And this was basically a hypothesis was some kind of organic thing can help fight allergies without going in great detail. And what was cool about this, number one, it was a German research firm that somehow got a hold of me. So they were pretty cool. I had conference calls at odd hours of the day. But we used a couple tools. We used focus groups, and then we did an online bulletin board. And we kind of did it sequentially. The focus groups kind of helped us narrow down the concepts. And then we went online and got people. One of the advantages of online, you can recruit people from all over the country. So if you're looking for people with a narrow medical problem, suddenly instead of recruiting people for a focus group in Atlanta, you can recruit across the country. So that was great. It really helped them narrow down concepts and help them focus on what would be the best product to make going forward. What are some other ones? I love talking to local folks. I've done some work for some local banks, community banks. And what I really enjoy about that is you get a broad, they're bank customers, but they're in all types of businesses. Mm-hmm. And, you know, banking and financial services is undergoing a lot of changes. You know, I do most of my banking online and things like that. But you feel like you're part of the community. I went to a small town north of Atlanta and, you know, spent a half a day with these folks. And it was just a very rewarding process. And the bank, of course, got some great feedback on everything from, you know, ATM machines and personal service and online banking and things like that. So I always try and come up with specific recommendations on what I say, ranging from the strategies to the tactics. This is what we've learned. This is what your strategies, you know, should be, or how you might want to tweak them. And then sometimes specific tactics. This is what your signs or advertising should say, or this is what your packaging should look like. So I've been very fortunate to have a wide variety of clients, consumer and business to business, and it makes the job very interesting.
Folks, we're here with Bruce Peoples, and he's with Peoples Marketing Insights. You mentioned your background in consumer products, but you mentioned B2B in there as well in terms of the clients you currently work with. So, how does your work differ in a B2B context versus consumer?
That's a great question, John, because my wife is also in marketing. Excuse me. I met her at Hanes, and she was working in underwear, but that's a whole different story.
You've got some interesting stories. We're going to have to talk offline, I think.
Actually, I believe the framework for marketing is very similar. You have to know who your target audience is. You have to know what their needs are. And then you design business to business, it could be products or services, to meet those needs. And I'm sorry, how did you phrase your original question again, John?
Well, just the difference between different dynamics that are going on consumer versus B2B.
Yes. Okay. Well, when I started out in consumer products historically, and still has a lot more data. They have what we call Nielsen retail scan data. You can know exactly how much your product, how much you sell in different accounts and things like that. a lot of consumer products and stuff are sold directly to consumers. So B2B has a little bit less data. And then B2B, you're often dealing with like a buyer or, procurement manager who buys, let's say, widgets for a whole company. So it's a different audience. But one of the things I learned is that those folks also have emotional needs, believe it or not, as we talked about consumers being emotionally connected. A buyer, his or her emotional needs are they want to feel confident that the product you're selling them is not going to keep them up at night, that it's reliable, that it fits in with all that they're doing. So that's one of the fundamental differences. I go out and recruit. I often use the proxy of toothpaste, toothpaste consumers. Well, there's a million of those. It's easy to find them. But B2B buyers and things like that, little different companies often will give me a list of their customers. And that really facilitates my talking to them. They also will send out an email or a heads up, hey, we've hired this guy, Bruce. He wants to, we've hired him to get your, objective, unfiltered feedback. Mm-hmm. So that gives them a heads up. And then I will reach out and talk to them and interview them. And so it's a little bit different.
So which, you've worked with both. I mean, which kind of company would you rather work for at this point? More consumer oriented or B2B, or does it matter to you?
It doesn't matter. I'm doing a B2B study right now for like a software solutions company, and we're interviewing end users, so to speak. And I find that quite fascinating. Consumer products is maybe a little bit more fun. I mean, sometimes I'll show packaging or I'll show advertising and things like that. But to me, it's the same challenge. It really just depends on the client. I have one client that came to me years ago, and they make giant fans that ventilate mines. So we're talking a fan that actually sits on top of a mine. It can be 1,000 horsepower. So he came to me, and of course, I knew absolutely nothing about giant fans. But, I quickly learned they invested some good time training me and talking about their products. And I interviewed miners and procurement managers. I interviewed people up in Canada, 1,000 miles north of the border with a mine that's 8,000 feet deep. And so I really enjoyed it. And I enjoyed getting the feedback. I enjoyed pulling the insights together and sharing that with the client, saying, here's what I heard. And this is what we heard. And here's the implications. Depending on how comfortable I feel, I might say implications. If I really feel strongly about the subject, I'll provide specific recommendations. This is what you need to do. So I enjoyed both of them. I think the process is the same. Some of the executional details are a little different, and the nature of the challenges are a little bit different. But it's all marketing. It's all understanding your customer and coming away with what we call actionable insights, that can improve your business.
I'm curious about and if you don't want to use the name of the company, that's cool. But after doing a research project, the most surprising finding that you had that was totally out of the blue from what this company's maybe perception of their customers' feeling about their product or service was?
Well, that's a tough one to come off the top of my head. But I can tell you, I did some research, and this is where it gets fun, for a craft beer company. Mm-hmm. This is one of the top 15 craft beer companies, so they're a strong regional presence. Owned by an entrepreneur, or headed up by an entrepreneur, and craft beer has gotten very creative. Mm-hmm. And they have some serious challenges, craft beers, because it used to be flavor of the month, but now there's consolidation and things, and they really have to define what does the brand mean. And they were very passionate about this one particular product. So we did some focus groups in their sort of home region, but then we went to the fringes of where they have distribution, where they hope to, move across the country and grow. And we found, let's just say the product didn't meet the expectations that the company had hoped.
Oh, wow.
And and they were very passionate about this product. They have a great product. And this happens a lot, as companies will create a product and then they kind of figure out how to sell it. Now, this company has lots of other brands or flavors that, they're very successful with. But I think they were disappointed in our findings. But, we went through it in a good process. Everything we did leading up to that was approved and structured. We asked the right questions. And we actually gave a little tastes, which you're allowed to do briefly, 4 ounces or less. So sometimes, you don't always get good news, right? But it's in the long run, you need to know what your customers think. You don't want to spend a lot of money, for example, rolling out a product that the reality has, they're not passionate about. So
for sure.
Yeah.
Folks, we're speaking with Bruce Peoples, and he's the owner, founder of Peoples Marketing Insights. So, Bruce, sounds like you've been working with some pretty sizable clients.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm a small to mid-sized business, is there room for me? How do you work with a business like mine?
And that's a great question, John. There sure is. There's a lot of ways. Well, first of all, I enjoy working with small businesses, especially if they're marketing oriented or customer oriented. So, like I said, the easiest tool I have is a phone interview. So, small businesses. I'll use the focus group for example. The cost of a focus group are in recruiting people. I have to hire someone to recruit them, and they work with databases. They find them online, et cetera. And we pay them incentives to show up, $100, $150. We rent the facility. There's a lot of costs. Small businesses can avoid a lot of those costs. They can give me names. There's no recruiting costs. If they give them a heads up, I can call the customers. Mm-hmm. If they want to share a conference room, if they're on the location, they can bring customers together and that kind of thing. We still apply the same discipline process to the whole thing, but we don't have to spend money on those kind of expenses. And, they can bring their own food in, so to speak, that kind of thing. And so, like I said, I've done some work for some community banks here, and we did that instead of a facility, an office building. We went to a banquet facility, and they knew the folks. We served people lunch. We had a great discussion. So there are ways we can do it without the big expenses. And then, of course, online now is very easy too. Even Zoom really technically doesn't cost anything other than my basic membership. And so there are some affordable, resourceful ways that we can do research for small businesses.
Well, Bruce, this has been great. You've really, I think, given folks a lot to think about in terms of maybe doing this kind of work and the advantages of doing this kind of work. So let's ask the most important question, which is for those that would like to be in touch with you and inquire more about your services, tell them how they can do that.
Yeah, well, great. Well, I have a website. It's called peoplesmarketinginsights.com, and I have some case studies on there. And then, of course, my email address is bruce@peoplesmarketinginsights.com. I know it's a mouthful. My internet guy kind of secured that before he asked for approval. But as you know, once you type it in, it's done.
Sure.
We'd love to hear from folks. It's always good to talk. And sometimes just through talking, things start clarifying and things like that. And I would just add that, spending money on research, a lot of folks, smaller companies think it as a cost, but it's really an investment, as you would know, in brand equity. It's really a long-term investment, and it really makes you feel confident that your strategies and things are more targeted to your customer.
For certain. Good words from Bruce Peoples with Peoples Marketing Insights. Bruce, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, John. I appreciate the opportunity. I've listened to several of your podcasts, a couple people on there that I know, which is great.
And you came on anyway, so thank you.
I know.
Thank you for that.
I know, but you provide a great service. It's the business world and the tools that we use are constantly changing. As we know, this year is unprecedented.
Yeah.
So just having these conversations is very, very helpful to all your folks, all your listeners.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Again, thanks for coming on and sharing your insights with us.
My pleasure. And I enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Folks, if you've got some problems that involve administrative tasks that you need to get off your desk, you've got some bookkeeping, maybe your books are in a total mess. Maybe you've got receipts in a Nike box. Well, I got news for you. There's an answer, and it involves picking up the phone and calling S.E. Escobedo at Office Angels. She's the chief executive angel over there at 770-442-9246. You can also go to officeangels.us. They've been operating virtual since the beginning of their business 18 years ago. And so Essie listens to your problem. She picks the best angel in her team of heavenly angels that will come in, fly in, get the job done, and fly right back out. So give her a call and tell her I sent you, and I can personally recommend her because I use her services myself for my business. So she's awesome. Folks, just another quick request, if I can. We would love it if you would go on your favorite podcast app where you can find this show. North Fulton Business Radio is a search term. And we would love it if you would rate and review us, give us a 5-star review. It's not about us, I quickly add. It's about promoting the guests that we have on this show, because that's what our show is all about, is promoting the good work of our guests like Bruce that we've had on this show. So if you could do that, we would really appreciate that. We're on all the major podcast apps. I won't go down the list, but we're on all of them. North Fulton Business Radio. You can also connect with us on social media, North Fulton BRX, and we're on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. So for my guest, Bruce Peoples, I'm John Ray. Join us next time here on North Fulton Business Radio.